Hi, welcome to Papa's Workshop. Well, if you're like me, the high price of lumber is just gone crazy, and I don't want to buy anything that I don't have to buy. Well, in today's project, I'm going to do some wood turning. That's right, wood turning, and I'm going to do it with some scrap wood that I have around the shop from previous projects. Now this one, I'm just going to be using the solid wood, but I could also use scrap woods, laminate them together, and do the same thing. So go ahead, let's watch this one today, and I want to show you how I do it and make a beautiful bowl with virtually no cost whatsoever. Let's get started. A day in the shop with Papa in Papa's Workshop. To support my channel, please go to patreon.com/Papa's Workshop. In today's video, we're going to be taking an opportunity to make an economy-based bowl out of just scrap wood. And I think you'll agree, this turned out to be a beautiful project to do. The first consideration is how big is your lathe. For me, I can do a maximum as far as a radius of 6 inches, and that's actually touching the base. So what I want to be able to do is look at my 1x12, and this is 11 3/8. That will be good. I'm going to cut this square for 11 3/8 by 11 3/8. And I'm going to do that at the table saw to be able to get a nice square piece. Now this also could be done with scrap wood and just glued together, and I think I'm going to do one of those also. But I wanted to be able to show you with a solid piece of wood first and the steps, but as far as using the scrap woods and laminate them together, the end result is going to be the same. And if you mix and match different types of wood, I think you can really create a beautiful look. Now I need to find the center, so I'm just marking my tape measure at the angle so it goes from the 0 to the 12 inches. I marked a 6, that gives me the dead center. Now from there, I'm just going to take it over to the table saw and I'm going to cut this board in half, and that's where we get to start this. Once the board is cut in half at the table saw, I bring this over to my Cut-Tech jointer and I just plane the edge. I want this perfectly square so I have a very nice tight joint. One pass does it, and that is a beautiful looking edge on this board. Now I run the second one through, and I'm going to show you just how good that is. That is a beautiful cut, and I really enjoy having this Cut-Tech jointer in the shop. It has really made a world of difference. And if you look at this now, if I put these two pieces together, that is a perfect fit. I love it. So at this point now, it's time to draw some circles. So the first step in that is I just take my straight edge and I'm going to mark from one corner to the other, and I mark just one point because the cut line is my other point. That creates the center. Now this is 3/4 inch material, and typically when I make an economy bowl like this, I can use 3/4 of an inch, but I prefer actually to measure out 7/8 of an inch. It gives just a little bit thicker of a bowl that I can be able to work with. So from the center, for this particular design, I'm starting out at 1.5 inches, and then from there, 7/8 of an inch out to the edge of the board. Now keep in mind, this is going to shrink a little bit. The diameter of this bowl is not going to be that 11 3/8 that we started with. It will be a little bit smaller, and that will be perfect for the lathe that I have. Now that I have all my marks for the exact measurements that I need, I'm just going to take the compass and I'm going to go ahead and draw the circles for each one of them. Now for this design, I'm actually adding a base, because if you actually think about it, if my base was this 3-inch circle, and when I cut it at the 45-degree angle, that would actually mean the base would be very, very small, as you'll see in a few moments. But this right now is by design, because I am going to add a foot to this bowl to be able to make it where it's a little bit different than the typical economy bowl that you'll see out there on YouTube. The nice thing about a project like this is you can use the creativity to be able to use the scrap wood and use different color woods to make a wide variety of different types of designs. But for this one, I wanted to be able to keep it real simple, very straightforward, so you can see exactly what's going on. At the bandsaw, I tilt the table to the 45-degree angle, and then I'll make the cuts. Now on this outer ring, I could do a square cut here and be able to add a different type of lip to the bowl. But again, in the interest of simplicity, I wanted just to be able to go ahead and cut this outer ring at a 45 degree also. Now with the bandsaw, this only takes just a few minutes to be able to cut it out. And if for some reason you don't hit exactly on your line, that's okay. You've got a little bit of extra wood there when you are turning this on the lathe that is not going to cause a problem. So you don't have to be 100% totally accurate and stay on that line. So if you waver a little bit, don't worry about it. It'll be okay. Now as I'm cutting out these half rings, I'm going to keep them organized so that the rings stay together in the correct sequence, and that'll help keep the grain pattern consistent as well. So I'm just laying these out over on the workbench so that I can get ready to be able to glue them together. Now I wanted to give you just a little bit of a close-up here on being able to cut this circle, because you're going to start out just right here at the edge, and as you're cutting this, you're just going to be rotating the wood right around that blade. You want to be able to keep the center line pretty much straight from the blade down to the center point of the wood on the radius. And again, if it's not perfectly accurate, not a big deal. And you can even see here where I get off my line a little bit, and like I said, it'll be okay. There's plenty of room to be able to correct this once you get over to the lathe. Now that the rings are all cut, it took a little bit of light sanding, and I'm ready to glue these rings together. So a little bit of glue on each of the ends, and I'm just going to push them together. I'm not even going to clamp them. There's really no reason to it because these will stick together quite well. So that's all I do, is I push it together, make sure that I have good contact with the glue, and then I'll set it aside and do the next ring. Now after gluing all of these rings together, I'm going to let them dry for about 30 minutes. If you think about it, the clamping time is about 20 to 30 minutes when you're using the clamps on these different types of projects. Well, since I'm not using clamps, I still want to be able to give the opportunity for the glue to set up, because that 30 minutes will be plenty of time, because I can then take each of the rings and go ahead and glue them together and form the basic shape of my bowl. Now while the rings dry, I need to take this little bit and create the base. So I'm going to take a little bit of my leftover scrap. Again, I'm only using the 11 3/8 by 11 3/8 inch board, and I don't want anything to go to waste. So I'm just taking this scrap, putting a little bit of glue on that, joining these two pieces together, and then I'll cut it out on the bandsaw again, and that will create the base. So again, I want to have as little waste as possible, and with the design of this bowl, this is perfect to be able to use this little bit of waste material to be able to create the base. The next step, I just put glue on each of these rings, stacked them up, made sure they were centered, and put a big brick on top of it for weight and let it dry. And of course, I cut out my base also. After sitting overnight, it was time to go ahead and mount this to the sacrificial piece of wood. And I'm using a hot glue, and I'm also using wood glue to be able to make sure that this holds good and tight. I don't want this to be able to break apart and fly across the room. That would make for a real bad day. Not to mention the bowl itself would probably break into a million pieces. And to make sure that this is kept centered while I'm gluing this onto my wasteboard, I just move the tailstock over, put a scrap piece of wood there, and that applies pressure. Then once the glue is dry, it's time to get working with the tools on the lathe. And you can see it actually turned out to be really close to being centered. So this is going to make some easy work. Now I'm starting out with the gouge to be able to do the rough shape of this bowl. Now if you've ever done any wood turning, this is a lot of fun. It's very exciting to be able to take a flat piece of wood and turn it into a three-dimensional object. And with just a few basic tools, it really doesn't take a whole lot to be able to get started. Now I have a lathe that has a possibility of being able to turn 12-inch types of projects, but you can also get a smaller lathe as well as bigger lathes also. It's just up to you as to the type of project that you want to be able to turn on the lathe. And the one thing that I like to be able to keep in mind, one of the things that makes me happy is the sawdust flying in the shop. And you can see there's a lot of dust that's coming off. These shavings are just flying. In fact, they're flying right toward the camera itself. Now, after I finish doing the outside of the bowl, I'm going ahead and turn my attention to be able to do the inside of the bowl. And for this, I'm using a carbide tip tool to be able to do the cutting. And this is a round cutter that I have on this. And this makes it where it cuts very easily, very smooth, and it gives me a longer reach to be able to get down into the bottom of that bowl. Now, I don't have the special tool rest to be able to get down in there. This is still just a regular straight tool rest. So keep that in mind too. There are specialized tools that you can buy to be able to make it easier, but with just a little bit of practice and a little bit of thought ahead of time, you can plan out exactly where that tool rest needs to be and still get the job done. Once all the turning is done, it's time to be able to sand. Now I start with a 60 grit paper and I'm working up to 320 grit to be able to get a nice smooth finish. And this bowl is starting to look pretty good. And the sanding process is done on the slowest speed of the lathe, and it really does not take long to do that. And now I'm changing grit and moving up to the next one. And I'll repeat this process until I've gone all the way to 320. Now keep in mind, if you want to go even higher of a grit to be able to get it even smoother, you certainly could do that. It's not going to hurt anything. It'll just do nothing but continue to improve the look of the bowl itself. Now I want to get a good detailed look of what I did as far as the detail work with the lathe for the base. Now this was just a 3/4 inch piece of wood that I put on there, but it made it where I could shape it and make a nice design. Once I'm all finished with my sanding, it's just time to be able to put the finish on. And what I'm using is the shellac mixed with linseed oil and denatured alcohol, 1/3 each, and that's my go-to finish that I use for these types of projects. Now it does take several coats because, as you might expect, it soaks in for those first couple of coats. But it turns out to be a beautiful, beautiful bowl. So here's a look at the finished project, and I want to take the opportunity to thank all of my Patreons for helping to support this channel. And I want to thank all of you for watching today, and I hope and encourage that each of you will please subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell notification so you won't miss out on the videos that I upload. And again, thank you for watching today. This was a fun project to do, and I look forward to seeing you again on whatever project that I'm doing.